If you don't know me and this is your first time joining, welcome. My name is Natalie. I am the founder of True Alignment Academy, where we help people heal from trauma, their deepest trauma, because I'm telling you that if you don't heal your trauma from the very core of its root, that you're going to take all of your past and just project it onto the future. I am out on a mission to help you create an internal environment that allows you for success, that allows you for transformation. So welcome. If you're here with me live, put a hashtag live in the chat. If you're here for the replay, go ahead and put hashtag replay. And I want to make sure I get to all of your questions. So if you have questions, make sure you drop them in the comments. And if I don't address it on this call, I'll make sure I come back and get all your questions answered. So today we are talking about one of my favorite topics, overthinking, analysis paralysis. And boy, can I tell you, I have lived in this. Hey, Jonathan. Hey, Sabrina. Welcome. Analysis paralysis is something that I think almost everyone can relate to. And so today we're going to talk about identifying the root cause of where it comes from and learning strategies, how to break this cycle, and then also how to heal the root cause and actually move forward with clarity. Because, boy, let me tell you, you can really get stuck in this cycle of analysis paralysis. So, let me just tell you, what is it in the first place? What is analysis paralysis? And it's when you overthink a decision to the point where it becomes difficult to make a choice, where it becomes impossible to make a choice. So, have you ever felt frozen, like completely frozen, paralyzed, unable to make a decision, even when you know what needs to be done? Or maybe you've been in that space where you know what needs to be done, but you can't seem to get yourself to take the next step. You just completely freeze. And let me tell you, if you don't know this about me, before I really went and did the healing work and rewired my subconscious where all that trauma sat, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I really thought that I had brain damage. In fact, my next step was to meet with a neurologist to figure out why my brain didn't work. Like I couldn't form sentences, I couldn't make decisions. I thought for sure in my 20s I did some stuff that caused some brain damage. But what that was all the trauma living below the surface and the subconscious level just spiraling. And it was literally sucking all my brain power and creating this space where of inaction and paralyzation. Like I couldn't even utilize my voice. I couldn't straighten out my thoughts. I couldn't have any clarity. I always felt like I was in this fog. And that's what I really want to talk about today is that fog that you may be in, that space of overthinking when you're really beating the dead horse and it ends with no forward movement or no clarity at all. And let me tell you the root of this, the biggest root of this analysis paralysis is fear. When overthinking and fear keeps you spinning your wheels instead of taking action. You know, we get super anxious about making the wrong choice. And for many, you know, this isn't just a bad habit of perfectionism driving this. It lies deeply and it's tied to unresolved trauma. This is where this comes from. So, let's talk about how trauma actually creates this analysis paralysis. Now, if you haven't been through my guides section, my initial guides, I talk a lot about how the brain works. And so make sure you go check that out if this is the first time you're joining me live, because I reference that a lot. But let's talk about what trauma really is, right? Because it's not the experience as traumatic as that may be. What trauma really is when we are in a situation or we have a person and in that moment we have a deep emotion and we decide something about ourselves or the world, and that story which we created from our reality in that space governs and decides every decision that we make. It essentially recreates our reality based on the story that we told ourselves. That's what really creates the trauma in our life, and this is where analysis paralysis is deeply rooted. because trauma, it wires our brain for survival, not growth. And when you've experienced trauma, again, not as traumatic as the event may be, trauma could be something like, I mean, if you've been through COVID, P.S., you've been through trauma. If you work at the bedside, you've been through trauma, right? If your parent got onto you and in that moment you were terrified, you've been through trauma. If you've been at a grocery store and as a kid and you lost your parent, you've been through trauma, divorce, like you name it. During those times when we've experienced this trauma, our nervous system becomes very hypervigilant and it always scans for potential threats. And so this makes every decision feel like it carries life or death stakes, even when it doesn't. You know, we ask ourselves, like, what if I choose wrong, right? What if I fail? What if this leads to more pain? And especially if you come from a healthcare background, we are trained to look at worst case scenario. We are trained that when we get a patient in, we have already laid out any and all scenarios of how that prognosis may progress, right? So that we can be ready. The problem is there's no shutoff valve for that. So it even more accelerates our analysis paralysis on top of the trauma that we've experienced. And so the fear of, failure, rejection, or loss becomes so overwhelming because we have now in this decision-making process that we're trying to decide, we have looked at every worst case scenario. And so, especially if we have all of this trauma inside of us and the stories that we've told ourselves over a lifetime that have kept us safe in the moment, right? In order to have love, I have to be perfect. At one point, that served us and it kept us safe in an unsafe situation, right? But that's what we will always default back to, regardless of what our current circumstances is. Even if that belief system was created when we were 7 years old, it's still the lens from which we recreate our life now. So if that fear of failure, if that rejection, if those wounds are what is projecting our current reality, of course, it's going to be so overwhelming that it's safer to do nothing than to take a risk. It truly becomes life and death, hence where we get paralyzed and we choose to do nothing at all because it's just safer that way. So perfectionism really drives this overthinking and this paralysis. And a lot of the times we use perfectionism as a shield, right? Trauma fuels perfectionism as a way to regain control. If you've ever grew up in a performance-based love, the love that you were given is directly related to how you performed, right? So it has to be perfect. That's a lot of pressure. If that wound was never healed, if those belief systems created around that were never healed, it's still the principle and the truth by which you're living today. Your performance is based on love. So if you believe that if you get everything just right, if you perform just right, if you know it all, if it's just right, you'll be safe from criticism or judgment or disappointment, or you'll get the validation that you need. But the problem is perfectionism doesn't exist, right? So you stay stuck in this planning and researching and second guessing and never actually moving forward, because in order to move forward, you would have to create something that doesn't even exist. And the burden of that, right? So of the creation of this perfectionism lies in your love, right? Received on the other side, the validation. It holds the safety from rejection and all of these things. No wonder why you can't make a decision. No wonder why you're paralyzed and can't move forward. That's a lot of pressure on that decision and the creation in which you're trying to move forward on, right? All overthinking is also used as a numbing technique, the same way that our busyness is, right? I know if you're in this group, if you're listening to this call right now, we've never been taught in healthcare how to process and regulate our emotions. In fact, we've been encouraged, and especially through parental programming, if our parents didn't know how to do it, to shove down the emotions, stop crying. We don't show our emotions. It's the big elephant in the room that no one talks about. And at work, you definitely don't have time to do that. You got a job to do. Suck it up. Keep going. Pull your bootstraps up. Let's go. Right? So our innate response is to numb and to push down our emotions so that we can function in this busy society, so that we can just pull up our bootstraps and keep going, hustle and grind. So we use overthinking to avoid feeling. We get into that logical aspect of our brain, and we use analysis paralysis as a coping mechanism to avoid uncomfortable emotions, right? Instead of addressing the fear or the shame or the uncertainty that's bubbling beneath the surface, we stay in our head, right? So it becomes a distraction from feeling the emotions which actually serve us, because they're always just here to communicate with us. So overthinking can actually avoid our feelings. And it's a great excuse not to take action. It's a great excuse not to take action. When on the other side of action, there is the fear of that judgment. There is the fear of the shame that may come if we don't perform in this certain way, right? Overthinking can be a great distraction and a way to avoid feeling. Is anybody resonating with this? I lived it for a really long time. Very familiar with this pattern. So our self-doubt from past trauma also ignites the fire of this overthinking, okay? Because trauma undermines our confidence and our trust in ourselves. I made a mistake before. I can't trust my judgment. I'm not good enough to make this work. Who am I to take this next step? Who am I to create this? And this is the thing, when the overthinking starts, it fuels these questions about ourselves. What if I choose wrong? What if I fail? What if this leads to more pain? What if, right? Again, we're trained on the what ifs as healthcare practitioners. That's what makes us great. But we can't shut that off. How we do one thing is how we do everything. And this is the way that the brain works is when you ask yourself a question, the brain has to answer it. It leaves an open loop. And the brain is very efficient. It takes the easiest, fastest route to close all those open energy loops. So it's going to find the answers to all those questions. What if I make a mistake? I made a mistake before. I can't trust my judgment. And when we ask these questions in our brain, it's going to pull up all of the evidence in our entire lifetime of all of the different scenarios in which we felt that we didn't perform like we needed to, or all of the evidence that we can't trust ourselves, or all of the evidence of how we failed, because those experiences have never been healed, because those versions of us have never been healed. And so it sits in the subconscious mind. In opportune moments like this, when the question is asked, what if I fail? It will give you not only worst case scenario, but it's also going to pull up all of the evidence that sits in your subconscious mind of every time in your life where you have perceived yourself to fail. And then we wonder why we get into this place of paralysis. We wonder why it's so hard to move forward. These doubts, these beliefs keep you in this loop of self-doubt, and it convinces you that you're not capable of making the right decision, because that's what comes after that. If all of the evidence in your entire life of the times that you failed, or how you can't trust yourself come up, then you can imagine that it's going to leave you in full paralysis. How can you move past that? Right? It's not easy to combat the way of our nursing programming of looking at worst case scenario, but I guarantee you that you have lost the battle if you're battling against your subconscious mind and all of the trauma and all of the events in your life that are coming up reminding you of how you think you're not good enough, how you think that you're a failure, how you think that you can't hold all of the things. Because this is the reality, is that our childhood wounds deeply shape how we navigate the world as adults. And overthinking often stems from this unresolved pain or the unmet needs that we had as children in our formative years. Because from 8 years old, wow, that's big, Rachel. I just discovered that I do not allow myself to feel. How many people do? How many people do, right? I mean, this is a great question to ask yourself. Do you actually allow yourself to feel, or do you immediately band-aid it with something that distracts you out of the situation? Busyness, a numbing of some sort, and we will justify the heck out of it, let me tell you. And it may be the best excuse in the world. Is it safe for you to feel? Because again, like in our childhood years is where everything is formed. From 8 years old to all the way from 0 to 8 is when we create our core belief systems. That's when they are created, is before you turn 8 years old. And that is the truth that sits in the subconscious mind that navigates your reality and creates the trajectory of your life and what you're seeing. Moving forward, I don't care what you're trying to create. Whatever life you're trying to create, whether it's a business or better relationships, whatever your New Year's resolution is, whatever you're trying to do, it will only be repeated of past events. And your past will always be projected onto the future until you deal with the very root of your belief systems and your trauma. Fear of rejection is the rejection wound is a huge childhood trauma wound. And it shows up if you're constantly overanalyzing interactions or decisions to avoid rejection. People pleasing is a behavior that is synonymous with this wound. You may replay conversations or decisions trying to figure out how to be good enough, how to not disappoint others, how to make sure that you carry everyone else to make sure that they're happy. I mean, no wonder why you can't make a decision. When your decisions are based on everyone else's like their ability to be happy, right? Love me, see me, need me. I can't make a decision that is going to affect anyone else in a negative way because my validation comes from their feelings. My love and my validation comes from the fact that they're okay. I just rescue everyone else while I'm dying inside. This is from a rejection wound, an experience in rejection from a caregiver, from a peer authority figure at a younger age. And in that moment, you decided that your love was no longer something that was created inside of you. Your love is from an external source. Your validation is from an external source. And that, no matter what you do, every time you show up, you're going to show up in a space that says, love me, see me, need me, because I don't know how to do that for myself. Because at one point in my life, it wasn't safe for me to create that, and I had to find it externally. No wonder why you can't make a decision. And I guarantee you, if that's the root from which you're making your decisions, the decision that you make, you will not be happy with. The decision that you make is not going to bring you joy or fulfillment or get you any closer to the life that you want to create because it is solely based on other people's needs, not your own. Fear of failure is another driving force of overthinking. It shows up by overthinking every decision to ensure that you don't make a mistake. So you avoid taking risks, or you delay action out of this fear of judgment. This is where procrastination comes along, right? Out of fear of judgment, or what if I mess it all up? Because look at all the evidence of my life of how I've messed everything else up, or how I've failed before, right? Or disappointing others. And growing up in an environment where mistakes were harshly criticized or where perfection was expected is the root cause of this. Because it was unsafe to make a mistake. So when we're in this analysis paralysis, I guarantee you, if you haven't healed these wounds, you are in the space of a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old in your decision-making skills. Because the belief system that was created at that age now governs everything that you do. Until we go back and heal that version of ourselves and rewire our brain to give us an opportunity to do something different, to create the safety inside of us, to create the trust inside of us and a connection with ourselves, so that we know after this decision, no matter what I decide, I'm going to be safe on the other side. No matter what the outcome of this decision is, I'm going to be okay on the other side. Because right now, where you're sitting, you probably are going to attach a story to the results of your decision. Right? If that decision went wrong, then you may tell yourself the story of, this isn't meant for me. I'm just a failure. I failed this. I'm giving up. Or this is too big, or I don't trust myself, or I don't have enough time. You name it, I guarantee you'll make a story around it, the result. Instead of saying, I made a decision, I'm safe on the other side, I trust myself still, and now I get to look at this from an observation point of view, and I get to pivot and make changes accordingly, versus my whole worth being tied to the results of the decision that I make. Wouldn't it be amazing if you were confronted with a decision, or you had, your big life decision, or something on the table in front of you that means so much to you, and instantaneously you're able to create a decision based on the fact that, number one, you know what's right for you because you know what is in alignment with you, because you know yourself. Easy to make that decision without an entire history being pulled up of all the ways that you failed before, all the ways you've been hurt before, or all of the ways you can't trust yourself, or how this is going to go wrong. And then on the other side of that decision and its results, can you just imagine the lightness of being able to say, well, that didn't go as planned. Now let me look at it and see how I can pivot that, versus the shame, versus the I'm a failure, and the burden that we carry from the story that we tell ourselves and reinforce the belief systems that caused us to overthink in the first place. It just fuels the fire to further overthinking. And then you get to a point where there really is like no decision making. You live in this toxic comfort zone because you default back to the comfort zone because you don't trust yourself. And because the truth that is sitting in your subconscious mind is based on the trauma that is unhealed. And that's what's navigating your life. And that's what's making the decisions for you. There's no ability for risk because of the long list of history that you have of all of the things that you've done wrong, or all the ways that you've been hurt. Fear of punishment, conditional love, neglect or emotional invalidation, comparison and competition, constantly being compared, and creating what that creates as an adult is that you begin to compare yourself with everyone else. You scroll on social media, and what's the story that you're telling yourself? I can never do that. I can never be them. Why even try? And so overthinking becomes this way to justify or validate your thoughts and emotions, right? And validate these unrealistic standards that you've created for yourself just to prove your worth, because your worth is tied to, you name it, your productivity, your decisions. Being controlled is another one. And as an adult, you may overthink decisions because you didn't develop that confidence in your ability to make choices on your own due to controlling caregivers or, overprotection or a limitation in your autonomy growing up. And internalized shame is a killer. If you miss my live, check out the guide section or drop the word shame in this chat. You got to see it. It is a game changer because I lived in shame for so long. And let me tell you, it definitely fueled my paralysis and my overthinking, because overthinking becomes a way to mask the shame and avoid situations where you may feel exposed, embarrassed, or judged. Again, overthinking is very justified to use as an excuse. And the root of that is because you grew up in an environment where you were made to feel that something was inherently wrong with you. I'm telling you today, there's nothing wrong with you. The brain works how the brain works. And it will continue to work how the brain works. And this is the thing, there's a way that we can actually control the brain when we heal the trauma that is driving our belief systems and driving all of our actions and behaviors. Rachel, I'm wearing a suit of armor 100%. And that suit of armor has protected you for all of these years, right? Everything that we've ever done has been a way to protect ourselves. I look back at the situations that I used to hold so much shame for, and I have unconditional love for myself because I did the best I could with what I had. And every behavior and every single action I took was for self-preservation. But you have to heal those versions of you in order to create the safety inside of you to take the armor off. You have to create a relationship of trust with yourself. I guarantee you, look at the relationship that you have with yourself. What are you telling yourself on a daily basis? When you really think about it, would you ever have a relationship with a person that talked to you that way? We have to have an intimate, unconditional love relationship with ourself. And that requires us to heal the pain and the situations in which we've created the story that we're broken, or we deserve to be punished, or we have to be perfect, or all of these rules that we've created for ourselves to show up. All of these rules we've created and beliefs that we have around how we love, around who we are. When you get rid of that, guess what you're left with? Your authenticity. You're left with understanding that your value and your worth is just you, that you are good enough exactly how you are with all of your flaws. There's no need for a mask or armor anymore. There's no need to show up in a way that to make other people feel validated or you to get validation from them. The cost of analysis paralysis. I want you to ask yourself that. How many times have you gotten into this cycle? And I'll tell you, usually analysis paralysis will haunt you when you're trying to do bigger and better things for your life and you start to break out of that comfort zone, right? As toxic as that comfort zone is, it's exactly what it is. It's a comfort zone. We will always be driven back to our comfort zone unless we can hold the discomfort of growth. And one of the ways that you will know that you got to do the inner work first is this analysis paralysis. The cost is great here. There's so many missed opportunities. The analysis paralysis and the overthinking keeps you stagnant in your business and your relationships and your growth. And then you tell yourself a story. right? And the frustration and the blame and the shame for not making the progress, it's heavy. Gosh, it sticks with you like a burden. The longer you stay stuck, the more you reinforce the belief that you're incapable of taking action, which then only deepens the cycle, right? It only deepens the cycle. How much is it costing you to stay stuck in your head like this? To go around and around on the merry-go-round of shame and the inaction, and then blaming yourself for the inaction, right? I don't trust myself enough to do this. What are they doing? What's your answer for this? I'm telling you, if you're building your life based on everyone else's opinions, you're going to build a life that you don't recognize. And it is totally out of alignment with who you are. That life is something that you don't want to build. Let's start at ground zero, because the one way that you can get over this analysis paralysis is by addressing the root cause. And that is healing your trauma to break free from this. Because when you process your emotions and your beliefs tied to your trauma, you begin to create safety on the inside. And that's what it takes to begin making decisions. Safety and trust, not from an external place, but from an internal place. Because when you know that you're safe and you trust yourself, you can like split second decisions. And on the other side of the decision that you make, you know that you're going to be okay. You know that you're going to be okay. Analysis paralysis isn't just a matter of indecision. It's a sign of deeper wounds that need healing. And I'm telling you that this is exactly what we do. We are here for you in this space. I was there. I couldn't make a decision if my life depended on it. And when I did, I would shame myself for the decision that I make or how I showed up in it or what I didn't do. It's like I could never win. It was miserable, miserable. When I started to heal the versions of me that had survived those places, but it was no longer serving me to live out those belief systems of perfectionism and my identity. Whenever I created the safety inside of me to own who I am and love myself first, man, everything changed. And that's where it starts. That's where it starts. So if you're ready, I have a link in the comments, book a call with me, let's talk, because I'm telling you, it doesn't matter the next mission, the next big goal, whatever you're trying to do. If you were stuck in this analysis paralysis, this is your fire alarm. Pay attention to it. Don't just turn the fire alarm off. This is your sign. There's something deeper. And when you heal from the inside out, you're unstoppable. There isn't anything that you can't do after this. Opportunities are endless, absolutely endless. But it has to start with you. You were never meant to stay stuck. You were never meant to stay stuck. You were meant for bigger, deeper things, but it has to start here. Book a call with me. Let's chat. Thank you so much for joining me today.